Now, if that survey comes back and says that we'd like to go ahead and take a look at veterinary nurse as a potential title to implement, then there's different ways to look at each of those states, because I think that's important information for you guys. How would it happen in my state, or how are we planning on doing this? And we've taken a good amount of time to gather information on the Veterinary Practice Act, how the veterinary technician profession is outlined, nurse title protection, and we're starting to find out what the nurse's position is. And so if we put those together and took a look at each of the states, these states are fictitious because I didn't want to give you guys any idea of what your state might look like. But in the state, like the North, the Vet Tech Association is for the change. The Veterinary Medical Association is also for the change. The Veterinary Practice Act doesn't have anything outlined currently of what the terminology used is. The nurses don't have their title protected, and the nurses are in favor of that change as well, that they're in support. That would be the perfect state. Everyone's on board. But you can see that as we have different kinds of combinations of each of those agreement versus disagreement, it might be harder and harder. And so the states that are listed towards the top here, these types of states would be a lot easier to implement this title in than some of the other states that might not be. Now, to give you guys a better idea of what the states actually look like, here is a map of states that we consider the title change would be most probable in, that it's not going to cause much of a conflict, that there is no nurse title protection. And so if as long as the state boards and legislation feels that it would be better for the protection of the public, then they would be able to implement it. And most of these states have an active vet tech association that can advocate for the profession. Now, there are a good group of states where it's probably going to be able to be implemented based on the fact that the state doesn't have any nurse title protection, or there's no conflict in language. There's still an active vet tech association in place that can advocate for the profession and this change, that we would have a relatively easy time implementing it in. And then there are some states that we would consider having some good potential, that some of these states don't have nurse title protection, but maybe there's not a good vet tech association in place that could advocate for it, or there could be some conflict in language. These are the ones that have possible conflict with nurse title protection that we could work through and figure out what's important to maintain and what would prevent us from violating the Practice Act. And then some more that would be challenging for this to be implemented in, that nurse title protection does have conflict in language, or there's a possible conflict. Vet Tech Association may or may not be active in that state, or they might be against it themselves. And then there are a few states that we would consider very difficult in for this to be implemented in, where the nurse title protection has definite conflict in language, or there's been some precedents of efforts in trying to implement the title that has been halted because of different kinds of intervention. Or it could be that the Vet Tech Association isn't agreeing with that particular change either. So there's different kinds of things. And so if we take a look at this, it is possible in majority of the states. And this is where, we get back to what our current focus should be, which is to continue discussing this with your membership, the veterinary technicians around the nation, educators, nurses, and all the other entities that we listed, the stakeholders. And then we'd like to coordinate efforts with each of the states through the Model Practice Act, providing education, background information, and gathering your feedback so that we can work together on this issue regardless of what the title might be, because the main goal here is to have a high standard entry requirement into the profession so that there's value to the profession that we are in. And at the end of all this, I know there's a lot of discussion, back and forth discussion about we want to be veterinary nurses, or no, we should be veterinary technicians, or different people having different kinds of opinion regarding it. But the one thing that I'd like to mention is that the truth is the title nurse is protected in many of the states. And so this is where the respectful dialogue is going to be important, so that we're reaching out to the nursing community in these states that we would have conflict in, that we're reaching out to the state boards, we're involving the nursing state board in the conversation, that nobody gets surprised by any of the efforts that we're putting forward. Disseminating all this information is going to be important as well. We've collected a good amount of information. We're going to continue collecting information so that you can use it to make the right decision. And we want all of you to encourage an informed response to the survey that we're going to be putting out, that this is not an emotional response, or that this is the response that any individuals or group of individuals want. We want this to be an accurate picture of what everyone in the profession wants. And taking all that information, the question that we should be thinking about, and all the state boards should be board members of state associations should be thinking about, is your state association on board? What parts of it are you on board for? And that's kind of the conversation that should be going on. And we're here to help you guys have the information to make that decision with. So what NAVTA will be focusing on is to continue collecting and disseminating that information. The web conference series are just the beginning of it, and to give everyone a heads up that we'll, starting in a week or two or so, we'll provide this type of web conference to the general vet tech public as well, and the veterinary community, that people within the veterinary community can just log on and find out information about. We'll provide some recordings that would be able to be disseminated as well. Probably split it up into short clips so that we answer specific questions that people are interested in, that they don't have to sit through an hour session. And we'll definitely provide the results from the survey that we get. And that survey is designed so that we can split it up into different demographics, whether they're credentialed technicians, non-credentialed medical personnel, veterinarians, and even state by state. We do have a meeting scheduled with the CVTEA and the AVMA on November 5th that we will be attending and taking this information to. And we plan on concluding the survey by that point in time. And then at the NAVTA Leadership Summit, which is January 12th of 2017 in Chicago, that we are inviting every one of you to come to. We'll have further discussions, and we'll have more information that we can make a profession-wide decision on. And I'd just like to emphasize that through all of this, communicating with everyone around you is going to be important. That throughout this whole initiative, NAVTA has taken a tremendous amount of effort to be present in different locations, meeting with different entities, having the conversations, figuring out and finding out what some of their concerns might be, so we can answer the questions that come up. And hopefully that's visible with the content that we provided with this webinar. We'd like you to do the same. Do you know what your members want? You might already know what your board wants, but do you know what your members want? Do you know what your non-members that's a part of the profession within your state wants? Have you had a conversation with the veterinary medical board? Do you have an established relationship? Because none of this is a question that we can answer by ourselves and make happen. It's going to be a field-wide, and to a certain degree, it involves people outside of our field as well to come to the right decision on. And so ask those questions and make sure that you understand where everyone else is coming from. So Heather, if you have anything to add, please do.
One of the things to be able to add to that last slide, Ken, is that it's taking the conversation beyond, our veterinary industry. And if you have a conversation with a nurse or it seems confrontational, back up and seek to understand where their objections are. Ken and I have both found out that if we just take a moment to listen to them and what their objections are, and then we provide them the information that overcomes those objections, ally that's on our side. So ask and seek to understand where they're coming from, because everybody has a stake in this role or where we're moving, and it is very important to understand each of them and their objections that they may have.
Okay, and what we see coming in the future is, regardless of what title we end up deciding on pushing forward, we're going to be looking at allying with different kinds of organizations that are interested in driving the profession forward to make sure that we have the resources to be able to support your activity in the States. And so look forward to that. We'll give you guys more information as things develop, and that's the path that we're heading into. So I guess at this point, Jamie, should we take the questions that we have?
Yeah, let's do some questions. So